will see it torn apart by a different kind of storm.
We engage them with tank main gun rounds. You see the explosions going off.
I dropped down inside. I looked through my commander's sight. I was vitally impressed with the enemy.
The U.S. 2nd Armored Cavalry is on a collision course with the Tawakalna Division of Iraq's Republican Guard.
They see themselves being great warriors who are expected to stand and fight and even die so that others may live.
Two tank armies clash on a remote strip of desert. This is the Battle of 73 Easting, armored warfare at its most intense.
This probably was the last great tank battle of the 20th century.
February 24th, 1991. American tanks roll across the Saudi Arabian desert toward the Iraq border. They're part of a multinational force with a clear and simple mission: to drive Saddam Hussein's Iraqi army out of Kuwait.
Coming out of the Iran-Iraq War, Saddam has two problems. He has a great big military with nothing really for it to do. The other problem he has is that he has devastated Iraq's economy as a result of the Iran-Iraq War. And so when you're Saddam Hussein and you need money, when you need it, you do what comes natural. You rob the piggy bank next door. And in this case, that piggy bank was Kuwait.
Iraqi armor and infantry overrun the oil-rich emirate in just 36 hours. Saddam ignores the United Nations demand for an immediate withdrawal. And the UN sends an American-led coalition of 620,000 to show him they mean business.
Saddam realized that he was in a bit over his head, but in Saddam's mind, the great weakness of the United States was in their inability to take casualties. He assumed that it would be very much like the Iran-Iraq War. It would be a slugging fest between these two sides, and that in the end, the Americans would cry uncle first. And so the strategy that Saddam lays out is designed to cause the most casualties to the United States while absorbing the least damage to his own forces. He dug in the biggest share of the Iraqi army, 51 of 66 divisions, and he dug them in deep.
Saddam deploys 16 infantry divisions and 2 armored corps along the Saudi border to absorb the brunt of the coalition attack. He holds his best fighters in reserve. 8 divisions of the Republican Guard, 1,000 tanks and 120,000 men are poised to strike a massive counterattack and inflict devastating casualties on the advancing coalition.
The scheme for defending Kuwait that they actually employed was really the only one that was available to them. And the problem that they had was that the coalition wasn't going to play by their rules. They don't believe that it's possible for the coalition to move any further to the west. It is trackless desert out there, and the Iraqis didn't believe that the Americans could possibly move any further west than that, because the Iraqis themselves, whenever they tried to operate in that desert out there, got horribly lost. There were no terrain features, there were no roads. It was impossible to maneuver out there. And the one thing that the Iraqis weren't aware of was, at that time, a brand new technology called the Global Positioning System.
It's the first GPS war. Satellite technology enables the coalition to cross into Iraq far to the west of the main Iraqi defensive line. setting the stage for an attack on their unprotected right flank. At 1300 hours, the U.S. 7th Corps breaches the sand berm, marking the border between Iraq and Saudi Arabia.
We had a PSYOPs platoon with us with these 25,000-watt speakers on top of Humvees. They were there to broadcast surrender appeals, but I had them play Ride of the Valkyries as we were crossing over the berm into Iraq.
It's kind of cool watching it, but there was nothing there.
Our unit was moving to the north and to the east, and really not hitting a whole lot. I mean, yeah, we did. We had some reconnaissance units we ran into, but after a couple of shots at us, they would give up.
You had an Iraqi military that were desperately unhappy and really just wanted to go home. These were not Iraq's first-rate troops. They were mostly Shia conscripts who had been conscripted during the Iran-Iraq War and been kept in the army ever since. They were desperate to get out of the army, and massive U.S. formations would run into these tiny little Iraqi units.
These forces would fire at you. You would quickly overwhelm them, and then you would see the white flags come out and you would take large numbers of prisoners.
This is what the main coalition armored force encountered on the first day of its climactic swing around the right flank of the Iraqi army.
The armor of the 7th Corps rolls ever deeper into Iraq, but at a snail's pace. Cautious force commanders order continual halts.
And what they basically did was said, you know what, if we're going to go due east, we're just going to use the eastings, all the north-south grid lines, as our methods to control your rate of advance.
It was almost like we were crawling. It was not a fast lightning strike. It was very slow. Okay, we'd move a few clicks and they'd stop us.
I'm in a 50-ton vehicle, all this ammunition. I can drive 40-something, 50-something miles an hour, and you're telling me to stop? You know, the enemy's that way. I need to keep going.
There was no one forward to see anything, to make a personal evaluation. There were no Patton, Rommel, Guderian types who were pulling up next to my tank saying, well, there, Major, what do you think?
By the end of the second day, the initial surprise and strategic advantage of the flanking maneuver is lost. And the Iraqis realize that the U.S. 7th Corps is about to cut off and surround their forces in Kuwait.
It's at that moment that Iraq's general staff actually demonstrates some degree of real competence. They recognize what's going on, and what's more, they realize from the ease with which American formations have been destroying Iraqi formations throughout the theater, that if they are going to stop the American 7th Corps, they're not going to be able to throw some ash and trash, some weak formations in front of it and allow their better units to escape. Instead, they're going to have to put their best formations in front of those American divisions.
The Iraqis make their stand on a defensive line stretching 90 kilometers along the northwestern border of Kuwait. 2 infantry and 2 armored divisions of the Republican Guard will defend the northern half of the line. In the south and directly in the path of the advancing Americans are the cream of Saddam's armored forces.
The southern half of the Iraqi Republican Guard line is handled by the Tawakkalna ala Allah division, which means in Arabic, in God we trust. And they see themselves as being great warriors who defended their nation for 8 years and ultimately defeated Iran, the Persian menace. And they saw themselves as Republican Guards as being the best of the best, Iraq's elite, professional warriors, not conscripts, who were expected to stand and fight and even die so that others may live.